Kanye West versus The Alchemist, two legendary producers. But what happened when both flipped the exact same sample? Well, today we're putting their beats side by side to see who came out on top. You're about to see a side of their genius that's never been shown before. So let's settle this once and for all. Let's find out who sampled it better. In this video, we're going to break down how both of these producers made beats using the exact same sample, the different sampling techniques they used, and even some ideas that you can use for your own beats. So let's start by looking at the sample itself. This feeling is so new. This is a soul sample from the 70s that The Alchemist and Kanye both used in very different ways. First, we'll look at Kanye's beat. He used this sample way back in 2003 before his own albums were out, and he was still coming up as a producer, making beats for other artists. The beat that he made using this sample was for Alicia Keys on You Don't Know My Name. And beyond just making the beat, even some of the concepts and the songwriting were actually Kanye's ideas.
And I remember we were in the studio, he was like, you know what you need to do? You need to go in the booth right now and you need to just talk, like how they used to do on old records, just talk. And that whole thing was like a freestyle. I mean, Kanye was one I was like, and then maybe your cell phone crack up and
So let's take a look at how Kanye made the actual beat. Looking at this sample, there are many usable pieces, but it's this section here that even for me feels like the standout section of the entirety of the sample. That cascading piano idea just sounds beautiful, and this is the section that Kanye decides to build the entire beat around. Now, at the time of making this beat, the technique of pitched up vocal chops in your beat was popular, partly due to Kanye himself, and that's exactly what he does with this sample. He begins by pitching it up 2 semitones and speeding it up. Now, what's interesting about this sample is that it has somewhat identical pieces within it. Let me show you what I mean. We have this area of the sample here. And we have this here. Now, for the most part, these sound identical, but there is a difference. If you pay really close attention, you can hear there's a thin layer of strings in one part of the sample and not the other. You can hear with the strings, without the strings, with the strings, without the strings. And it's the part of the sample with strings that Kanye uses for his beat. It helps the beat sound a little bit more full, and it doesn't require him to add more of his own sounds into the beat to get it to sound complete. So we start this beat off using this chop right here. As you can see, he lets this chop run for a full bar. And after this, he creates another chop halfway through this phrase and repeats this over and over. So this is the piece he eventually uses. Again, this is the first chop here. And partway through this chop, we have this piece here. And Kanye repeats this in his actual pattern, giving us a 2-bar loop so far. But after this, Kanye uses the advanced chopping technique of extension. Let me show you what this is. Now, what a beginner might do at this point of the beat is just copy and paste this whole idea and play it over and over. This creates an obvious sounding 2-bar loop, but what does Kanye do? He uses chop extension to create a less obvious repetitive beat, and he turns this idea into a 4-bar loop instead. And he does this by extending his last chop in his loop here slightly further, so it plays past into this new bar. At that point, he creates a new chop slightly after where his initial chop was. And this is how he continues the loop for bar 3. From here in bar 4, instead of repeating the same chop ideas like so, he instead uses chop extension again and just lets this chop continue to play. Chop extension like this is a great strategy to get your sample beats to sound less repetitive. It's one of the ideas I include in my sampling cheat sheet, which you can download for free in the description box below. It's just meant to be a quick and easy tool that you can look up whenever you're stuck with a sample and need some new ideas to turn your short loop into a full beat. Again, free download in the description box below. Now from here, this 4-bar loop gets used a few times, but eventually we move on to a different loop where Kanye uses that amazing cascading piano idea from the sample. So let's take a look at how this idea was built. The first chop for this new loop is actually just the continuation of the last chop we heard from our last loop. After this chop, he cuts back into an earlier part of the sample, but take a look at how he does it. With this advanced chop placement, you can see this chop is placed 3/4 partway through a beat. This shows us that Kanye isn't just simply chopping his sample up on the snares or the drums. He's doing some advanced detail chopping here. This is a technique that you don't really see producers do nowadays. Now there's another version of this exact same loop that does get used elsewhere in the beat as well. And logically, it's similar to what Kanye built for that first loop that we covered, where he brings in a smaller chop from partway through a main phrase within the sample, and he repeats this over and over. As you can see, some really amazing choices throughout this beat and a lot of detail into where these chops are placed and how everything is pieced together. So those are the major ideas within Kanye's beat. Beyond this, Kanye does beef up the drums a tiny bit by adding in his own kick, but outside of that and some tiny switch ups and small effects here and there, this is how Kanye made the beat for Alicia Keys. Next, let's move on to the Alchemist beat that he made using this exact same sample back in 2011 for Evidence, called the liner notes.
Some nameless, others with stars and straps ain't famous, steel that ain't stainless, high haters.
The beat has more of a straightforward sampling approach here. In the beginning of the sample, we have this long phrase. And this is what the Alchemist uses for his beat. Similar to Kanye, this sample gets pitched up to semitones, and for the most part, the chops get used in a simple and straightforward way to build the base of the beat. For loop number 1, the chops go 1, 2, 3, 2. Then after this loop, the entire section of the sample just gets played from front to end. Now, as you can hear, this idea still does feel a bit bare, like some more layers could be added in, and so that is what the Alchemist does. We have a crash and I believe a vibra slap combined together to start the loop. Then we have this Ruby Andrews vocal sample that comes in, as well as this delayed guitar. This is another layer that shows up. Plus a few other small ideas and samples that only the Alchemist knows where they came from. As you can see, it's a classic Alchemist collage approach to beat making, where he builds a little bit more of a simplified idea of his sample, but then layers his own ideas and musical phrases to build something that feels much more complete. And that's basically how the Alchemist made his beat. Now, before you decide which producer sampled it better, how about I possibly make a fool of myself and also go against these two titans? Let me try to build a beat using this exact same sample, and let's see if I can defeat them. I really like that part of the sample that the Alchemist used. I'm a sucker for string samples. Plus the keys within this part of the sample sound pretty cool, so I'm going to try to create an idea using these sounds, but in a different way. I will start by using some stem splitting and remove everything besides the instruments. This might be considered cheating, I don't know. But from here, I will try my best to create a basic progression using the strings within the sample after doing some repitching and stretching. Now, just like the Alchemist, I'm running into a problem which just doesn't feel like the sample's filling up enough space. This still feels a bit bare to me. So I'm going to use a sampling technique here where I will take one layer and basically build two separate layers with it. To do this, I will route this sample into two separate inserts like so, and I will turn this off from being routed into the master. So now we have two layers of this one sampled loop of mine, which I can affect and manipulate and experiment with separately. My plan is that by using different effects on each of these layers, I can get them to fill up different spaces. One layer I will use as my lower frequency layer, and the other will be the higher frequency layer. Starting with my low layer, I will add halftime onto it and see how that sounds. You can hear those keys get slowed down and the string almost sounds like a brass now. Really cool. I kind of like the way this is sounding. For my second higher frequency layer, I want this to sound a little bit more experimental and unique. So let me open up Portal. This is the plugin that I use when I have no idea what I want to build, but I just want something to be a little bit out there. So I just start scrolling through some of these presets. Let's hear how this preset sounds. All right, that sounds absolutely insane to me. So let's start by building this beat around this new idea. At this point, I want to start reinforcing some of the musical ideas within this loop. For example, even though I like those slow down keys from layer 1, they sound a bit faint. So I'll use this guitar preset here. And I'll play along with what my sample is doing. To figure that out, I will open up Note Grabber. This is my plugin that lets you see every note within your sample and lets you turn them into notes that you can use for your own beats. By the way, if you download that cheat sheet that I mentioned earlier, I am including a free 14-day trial to Note Grabber within it. So again, click that link in the description box below to help level up your sampling game. So as you can see here, these are the keys that I like. So I will highlight them and bring them into my guitar. And now my guitar is helping reinforce that idea by playing the same notes, but now you can actually hear them in the beat a bit better. Now let's use some more instruments and sounds to fill up even more space in this beat. I'm gonna grab this piano here, and I'll again reinforce some of the ideas within the sample. By just knowing which notes exist in the sample, creating patterns just becomes much easier. So here is what I came up with for this piano, just a very simple idea. I'm going to use the same piano to create another pattern to fill up more space in this beat. Now at this point, my beat kind of sounds like it's a little bit too full. Even though I do love that second layer of the sample, I think it just might be too much in this beat. So for now, I will mute that higher frequency layer and maybe just bring it in during the hook for the beat. And now I will add in an actual bass. I'm gonna keep it simple and just follow along with my other patterns. Then from here, I'm gonna add some drums in and some smaller details. And like I mentioned, for the hook, this is when I'm gonna bring in that second layer of the sample back. So comment down below whose beat is your favorite. Feel free to burn mine. I promise I won't cry that much. Like I mentioned, you can download that free cheat sheet, plus you'll get a free 14-day trial to Note Grabber. Just click this little thing next to me here. If you're a sample-based producer, these tools will help you out like crazy. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you have any ideas for producer match-offs you'd like to see in the future. Otherwise though, I'll see you next time. Bye for now.